Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the interim executive director of NAMI North Carolina, and I'm so glad y'all are here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and building community around the topic of mental health. Our guest tonight is Kyle Mitchell. He believes there's a silent pandemic emerging across the planet. That's because he is a survivor and overcomer of severe social anxiety. Also, he is a TEDx and international speaker, social anxiety advocate, social media influencer, and recently published author. Kyle's mission is to help 1 million teens go from socially anxious to socially confident. He wants to start a new conversation among young folks, one in which mental health conversations are normal and all challenges are opportunities. We'll be talking with Kyle in just another moment. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Partway through, we'll show a video of the week, and then we'll spend time taking questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience, live on Facebook and Zoom. I want to have a quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We do appreciate their guidance and their support. Now, without further ado, welcome, Kyle.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we always like to know the background of our guests, what brought you here tonight. Tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
Sure, in a nutshell. So, well, as you heard, kind of my mission that you just explained, my mission is to help teenagers, the youth of the world about mental health. This is all because I struggled with my own mental health mightily, specifically social anxiety, some other things as well. And as I kind of progressed into my adulthood and adult life, kind of looking back was like, hey, I want to help other people with their own social anxiety. I got to a point where social anxiety wasn't controlling me. And I realized at that point, I wasn't the only one struggling with this. I need to go out and give back. So that's kind of what I do and how I got into this space.
All right. And excellent. I had a little echo there because I had my Facebook Live going. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you could hear that. Well, you've accomplished a lot, Kyle. What are you most proud of?
I don't want to seem shallow because I feel like I should say my kids, but I'm definitely proud of creating my own family. But I would say just like on a more personal and individual level is getting from where I was when I was in high school to where I am now. Getting to a point where social anxiety wasn't dictating my life and controlling it. I think that's the thing I'm most proud of because that was the hardest thing I had to do, is the biggest hurdle and challenge I've had to come across in my life. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. And I think that maybe folks who haven't struggled with a mental health condition might have, not completely understand your answer. Personally, I totally get it. There's just nothing more difficult than sort of crawling out from under that rock of mental health difficulty, that psychic pain, that, the feelings of shame and self-hatred that can come up, all that debilitating stuff. So I definitely understand that answer. And I appreciate your being candid and authentic with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, it's wonderful that you're a father. Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us about social anxiety. Did it begin for you in high school?
No, I would say I struggled with it pretty much my entire life, as early as I can remember. Obviously, when I was younger, really even up until high school and a little bit of college, I didn't even know what anxiety was or social anxiety. But I mean, I can remember times kind of looking back as like a 5-year-old being like, oh, that was social anxiety I was experiencing. But yeah, I experienced it my entire life. But I didn't really have to kind of face it head on until I got into high school, because that's when I made a big shift in my life, and I transferred from this really small private school to this, huge, large public school. And I kind of lost all my friends, all my little support circle, my safe zone. And that's when I kind of had to face it head on, and that was when the challenge began.
Right. That does make a lot of sense. Just going to a large, less personal, less supportive environment. That is a big shift. And it sounds like it came at a sensitive time as far as growing up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was 15 years old when I transferred. So yeah, there's a a lot going on in a 15-year-old's life, and then you kind of pile that on top of it. It was definitely difficult, and I always like to say, it was the worst time of my life, but also the best time, because so glad that I went through all that, because it made me who the person I am today. It made me so much stronger to have to go through that and fight that. And I'm so glad that happened, because I'm not sure where I'd be if I stayed in that private school the whole time. I think it would have been much harder trying to go into my adult life with, still really struggling with this and not really having to face it too much, and kind of stay in my safe little bubble. So I'm so grateful that I was forced in a way to kind of get out there and do it.
Hmm. Sure, there's something to be said for when life comes at you and you have to deal with something earlier rather than later. That makes a lot of sense to me too. What signs and symptoms did you experience with your anxiety?
So pretty much a little bit of everything. So, I mean, just rapid heartbeat, getting the sweaty palms. I call it like a heat wave over your body, for like particular situations. Let's say if I was like about to go give a presentation, it would, or if was asked a question in class, it would just feel like I was all of a sudden in a sauna, like I was just whoosh, just head to toe, just burning up, and just feeling just really uncomfortable all the time, especially in social situations. I just felt like I wasn't normal. I couldn't communicate with other people like everybody else could, is what I would always say to myself. So yeah, it was just a little bit of everything when it came to social situations.
Right. It's interesting as someone who's participated in NAMI support groups and also 12-step support groups of different kinds, how many people feel like the outsider, like they're not normal, they're different, they're less than.
Yeah.
But there's so many of us who feel that way. But that doesn't make it easy to
Ironic.
shake off.
Yeah.
It's interesting. How did you go from having severe social anxiety to being a speaker, a public speaker?
It all started from really just kind of exposing myself to anxiety in little bits and ways. So I started doing that in college, had some good success with it. And when I started this Instagram page, and I wanted to talk about social anxiety and give people tips and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? Public speaking was something I was never good at. I could never, be confident, comfortable with it. This is my next test. I need to, kind of get into it. So it started as a challenge. And I just randomly talked to this guy at my church, and he happened to run this group that where he had speakers come in to speak to these teenagers that he worked with. And there was like 15 or so. And so he's like, why don't you come speak? And I was like, cool, this is a great baby step challenge for me. It's not too many people. I can handle this. So that's really where it started. And I didn't expect it to like turn into my career, like stuff that I do all the time now. But it's funny because, like I said, I hated public speaking my entire life, was never good at it, never comfortable with it. Now I love it. Like I love public speaking. The fire comes out in me when I do it. I think well, just talking about what I talk about is fun. It's good to inform people, but also knowing every time, like 15-year-old me would never guess I'd be doing this right now. It's just so cool that I am. So I kind of I feel that every time, and it fuels me.
Well, that's so encouraging to hear. I remember reading once that of all people's greatest fears in life, one was death and two was public speaking. It's like, wow, those just, it seems like such a far cry from one to the other, but it really is scary for most people to get up in front of a crowd and just talk. Um, well, from what you're describing, it sounds like you slowly desensitized yourself. You took baby steps and, I can make this goal, a small group at a church, and then I can make this slightly bigger goal and up like that. Did you get any therapy, treatment, any kind of help that way professionally?
Um, I did some therapy. If I'm being 100% honest, I would just go, like, my parents, they tried to help me and like get me just like into some random therapist, not necessarily like focused on anxiety, probably because we didn't really know what I was struggling with. So they weren't great help for me.
Hmm.
Later on in life, when I knew what I was going through, or even now, I have like a therapist that I have on standby. So basically, like, anytime that I'm going through something, I need to talk to somebody, like, I know my guy Troy is going to help me out, because, like, he's designed to help me, and or he's kind of specialized in helping me what I need help with. So I can go and talk to him, and it was really good help. But the biggest thing for me when I was struggling in high school and college was really just opening up to people. I spent my entire life just holding it all in, all my emotions just inside. And what was such a big relief to me was just to go and speak to somebody. So first people I spoke to was my parents, just letting them know how I was feeling in school. And then, I spoke to my school counselor. So if I know a lot of people have a hard time getting access to, professional help. And, if you can't, that's not the end of the world. Start with, your loved ones, your parents, brother, sister, whoever that you love and trust. You can go open up to them. And that's exactly what I did. Did that cure my social anxiety? No, and not that you can even really cure it. So, but that was something that allowed me to get an emotional release and kind of relieve that burden off my back that I was carrying for so long, so I could start taking some action steps, because it's hard to do it when you're just holding all that in and just feels so overwhelming.
Hmm. Well, I'm kind of hearing two big takeaways from what you're saying. One is that when we talk about our fears and say it out loud, we take away the power. And when we share it with someone else, we realize, wow, this thing that I thought I'd be judged for, someone's actually being supportive. Of course, you got to pick the right person, and sometimes that's difficult. But that just just opening up and letting people know what you're actually experiencing can be a big help. It's a good time for me to promote NAMI support groups. It's our free service. We also have free classes, and you can go meet other folks who are struggling with a mental health condition and have that experience of unburdening. It is very powerful, as Kyle said. Another really interesting thing that you mentioned is that initially you weren't seeing the right kind of therapist, your parents didn't know what you needed, and so many people have a hard time getting what they actually need from therapy. Thinking of myself as a young person, I really didn't have the language or the understanding of what was happening in my own head to say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. Plus, I had some trauma that I had buried, so that made it even harder. But what do you like? What do you feel like was the disconnect with your parents trying to get you help and you sitting and spending time with someone and not getting helped?
Well, I think one was just, it was not that I'm like, so I know I'm still pretty young, but it was, 10 years ago, or actually longer than that, 12, 15 years ago. So not as much talking about mental health.
Yeah.
Anxiety and mental health was not something that was talked about in school ever, not one time for me. So there wasn't the information out there. It was hard to know what you were experiencing, because no one ever talked about it. There was so much stigma to it, and there still is stigma, of course, but it's definitely gotten a lot better, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So I think that was part of it. And then I think just knowing that the answer is not just go to a therapist, it's go to a therapist that's specialized in what you need help with. Because
Hmm.
just like with like physical health, you wouldn't go see the same doctor for, a problem with your hand as you would with your foot, because they're not specialists in everything. They can't be. The body's way too complex. And if
Mm,
the body's too complex, the mind is definitely way too far complex. So you have to find somebody who's specialized in exactly what you need, whether that's anxiety, depression, trauma, OCD, the list goes on. And I always tell people, like, go to Psychology Today. They have an awesome tool where you can find a therapist, and you can really filter out by, what they're specialized in. If you care about having a male or female, if they take your insurance. So I've had great success doing that, is, using that tool to be able to find somebody like, oh, okay, this person works great for me.
absolutely. Yeah, we have a free NAMI helpline too, which will appear very soon in our chat box here on Zoom, where you can call and get references like that. One of the things we refer people to is Psychology Today. And I think also from your comments, I want to say, if you're seeing a therapist, it can be harder for a child. I think they have sometimes less of a vote than would be ideal, right?
Yeah.
But if you're seeing a therapist and you don't feel like they're hearing you, you don't speak the same language, try another therapist. Sometimes the chemistry just isn't there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
100%.
Okay, so what have I got next on my list of intriguing questions? Um, Here's one. So when people hear that a friend has a mental health condition, the reactions can be all over the map. How did people react to you having a mental health struggle? What was helpful or unhelpful?
Um, so I guess how people reacted to my own struggle. Well, I mean, to be honest, I have the best parents in the world. They were extremely supportive of me. I mean, even though they didn't understand what I was going through, and probably a lot of what I said sounded pretty irrational to them, I mean, I couldn't have asked them to do it any better than what they did. I mean, they really just stuck to the book, even though they really didn't know the information. So I'm not sure how they did that, but they were very just like supportive of me. And they validated my feelings and emotions, never made me feel like, that's all in your head, or that's not really what's going on. It was more of, okay, I hear you, like, let me know how I can support you, type of thing. So honestly, I had a really, I don't want to say easy time with it, but I definitely didn't have not a whole lot of negative experiences with it. And I didn't talk to my friends much about it, especially when I was in high school. I mean, obviously they all know about it now, and they kind of like connect the dots, like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But no, I mean, honestly, it wasn't too bad. And I think for the most part, as long as you're sharing with people that you love and trust, you would hope that they have a good reaction to it, and that they're open and supportive to it. At least that's what I always try to tell people. Be open to hearing people's things, even if it sounds irrational to you, because sometimes anxiety sounds pretty irrational from the outside perspective, especially. So if somebody is opening up to you, say, oh, okay, I hear you feel this way. Make sure you validate their emotions. Let them know that sounds challenging, difficult, frustrating, whatever it may be.
Right. Excellent advice. So you're doing that listening, that's active listening. It's some people call it reflective listening, where you make sure that you let the person know you hear what they're saying, and you get the feeling part of it, because that emotional piece is just so important. So excellent advice there from Kyle. Did you experience any stigma? I'm so glad that you had a supportive family.
Hmm. I have to think here. I mean, nothing like jumps out at me by
But
any
that's a
means.
no.
No, yeah, yeah. If I did, I would have immediately thought about it. Sure. So, no, I don't think so. No, not really.
Wow. Well, it's wonderful to hear that that's a possibility, that young people are growing up with support and good experiences, and that makes me feel like we're changing for the better as a world. So, yay. Um, your goal is ambitious. You want to help 1 million teens become socially confident. Tell us about that. How'd you come up with that number?
Well, I thought a million was a cool number. Honestly, I mean, there wasn't like a whole lot of math or strategy behind it. It was like, what's a really impactful number that will take me a minute to get to, but also reaching a million teens and doing that will have a significant impact on at least the United States. So I think there's like 4 million teens in the United States that struggle with social anxiety or have a social anxiety disorder. That's a good chunk of them to go through. So that's kind of how I came up with the number. And I know it's going to be challenging, and it is challenging, but it wouldn't be worth it if it wasn't challenging. I like to, kind of push the boundary, and I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life. And anyways, I turn 30 next month, or next week rather. So I got plenty of time to do it as long as I'm on this earth for a while. So I'm going to reach it for sure.
Well, I like that aspirational goal. That's a good thing to have. And it's such an important targeted goal. The suicide rate among young folks, especially young folks in the Black, Indigenous, persons of color communities, it's high. It's increasing at a higher rate, while some of the other demographics are actually decreasing or stable for the suicide rate in the United States. So I commend you on having that goal. And if you think, the like 300 million people in the United States, give or take, and 1 out of 5 experiences a mental health condition in any given year. So yeah, there are plenty of people. It's a wide net, and I applaud you on that goal. So you have a comment in your bio about being proactive with one's mental health, and you want to educate people on that. Tell us what that means.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just been a really big advocate of being proactive. I think we spend a lot of time, or like I feel like the majority of stuff you hear on the news, we talk a lot about being reactive, what you do when you start feeling anxious, or you feel depressed, or whatever it may be. Um, but I'm much more interested, how can we prevent that? So we can't prevent it totally, right? Even myself, I don't have perfect mental health or never have anxiety by any means. It's going to happen all the time. But how can I get to a point where that doesn't happen as often? What are some proactive things that I can do? And so, kind of to answer your question, what are some things that I can do to kind of get ahead of the game and make it to where my mental health is at an optimal level to be able to handle any anxiety that comes my way. And that's really what I wrote the book about, was just how can we be proactive with our own mental health. And so like one of the biggest things for me was, creating a morning routine, which was really fun for me. I mean, I always spent my whole life just kind of waking up and then getting in the shower, eating breakfast or whatever it may be, and not really ever spending any time with myself, and like really just being in a present mind with me. And now it's how I start just about every morning. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I stay as consistent as I can. And I have, daily practices that I go through that I have found have worked really well for me to be able to just decrease the amount of anxiety that I feel, and just really kind of give me a boost of mental health for the day, just kind of like charges my mental battery, so to speak. And there is no like one size fits all. I can't tell you if you do this and this in the morning, it's going to do wonders for you. You have to figure out what works for you. And I spent years trying to figure what works really well for me, and what doesn't. So that's really what I wrote the book about, was how can you find something that works really well for you, because what works for me probably isn't going to work for you, and you want to find something. And I always found it really fun, just like testing out different practices. I love when I, come across new studies on mental health of, this is supposed to do this. And I'm like, okay, I want to try this. I'll try it out for a month and just see what happens. But I just have fun with it, and I love it. And I can tell the difference between days that I do my morning routine and days that I don't. There's a huge difference, because if something comes out of left field at me that I'm not expecting, it can create a lot more anxiety on days that I'm not prepping my mind in the morning. And it's just so
Mhm.
good to just start your day out that way instead of, getting up, scrolling on Facebook or, TikTok or whatever, and just kind of overloading stimuli in your brain. And it
Mhm.
just it creates a lot of anxiety that way.
Sure. Do you meditate? Do you do yoga? Do you walk?
Yeah, I meditate. I do yoga every once in a while, but it's not something that I do all the time. But uh, I mean, right now, and it kind of changes all the time. I kind of add and subtract stuff out and test things out. But right now, I'm doing first thing in the mornings. I'll just get an ice bath for 2 minutes. Then I'll go meditate, and then I'll pray, and then I'll just write in my journal, and then I'll do my gratitude journal, and then I'll usually exercise if it's a workout day for me after that. And then after that, I'm good to go.
Wow. Did you say ice bath?
Yes.
Wow. You're committed. That's
Oh,
dedication.
it's awesome. If you do it one time, you'll probably want to continue doing it. I mean, it's a struggle to get in there at first, but the natural dopamine that you get from it is pretty substantial. And I'm not
Mm.
well versed enough to like quote the studies, but definitely take a look. It's pretty incredible.
Right on. Okay. I like that. Out of the box. Um, and I think it is really important to look at proactive or preventative health, as they call it, because you can end up in a situation if you're not paying attention. On the physical side, you might end up with diabetes. On the mental health side, you might end up with some really dark days that it's much harder to back out of than it is to try to keep on track with some basic good health techniques. Right. Um, and you, it sounds like you've had some dark days. You've had some struggles with your anxiety.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in high school for sure, and then up to pretty recently, I've definitely had some difficult times to get through. I mean, in 2020, my mother-in-law passed away, which was my wife's best friend, and that was a really hard thing for me to process and get through. And I mean, definitely morning routine helped me with that. But I mean, even with that, that was something I had to go to therapy with because it was just like, I don't know how to deal with this. It's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. How do you support someone that just lost their best friend and their mother? And me personally, I've been lucky enough to never really lose anybody in my life. So I've had that luxury so far, and I didn't know what to do, and so I had to go seek out help and get therapy, which is where met my guy Troy, and I see him from time to time when I do need it. But yeah, definitely have my dark days for sure.
Mm, yeah, it's good to have a tune-up guy.
Yeah.
How can we as a culture destigmatize men's mental health in particular?
Just talking about it. Oh man, it's just it's sometimes just irritating to me the men can't have feelings type of thing. So me personally, I just try to set the example. I'm a man and I have feelings, so I try to be vulnerable about the stuff that I go through. I try to share different things, and just show people that like being vulnerable is not a weakness. It's not. It's a strength. 100%. It's a strength. If you are strong enough to share your own emotions, share what you're going through, that means you're a strong person for doing that. And if you're having a hard time with it right now, it doesn't mean you're weak. It just means that you need to work on it. Practice with somebody, go open up to, one person. And it's just, we've kind of lived in this world up to this point where men aren't allowed to have feelings, they kind of go rub some dirt on it type of mentality, suck it up, be a man. And I hate all that stuff. So yeah, it's just like being open and just set an example. And I hope that what I do and what I share to people, especially to the youth and the young adults that I talk to, we can kind of start this new generation of men that's we're open, we we go out and we talk to each other and we're allowed to, share our feelings. And it's no fun having to hold all that stuff in, pretending that we have to be this version of a man. Like, absolutely not. I remember I used to do a podcast a while back ago, and we interviewed this one lady, and she wrote a book about, she talked about like different masculine roles and stuff. And I'll never forget what she said. She said, when she's talking to other females, she said, if you're looking for a really good man, go sit outside a men's support group, because they're the ones that they'll be willing to like open up to you and share. And I don't want to speak for women, but I feel like most women want to have a guy that is willing to, share their feelings with them, because I mean, most women will share their feelings with men, and it's supposed to go both ways. We're both human beings, so we need to talk to each other. So yeah, I could probably talk for a long time about that, but yeah.
It's such an important area. Some men have said that the only emotions men are allowed to have is anger and happiness.
Yeah.
None of those tender emotions, none of the vulnerable, as you said. And that's sort of part of your platform. That's one of the key areas you're wanting to focus on in your message. Is that a response to your own experience, to media messages, anything specific?
I don't know of anything necessarily specific. I mean, growing up as a kid, it was hard for me to hold my emotions in. I feel like I cried quite a bit. It was hard for me to just, suck it up and hold those tears in. I tried. I just was never very good at doing that. I don't know how other people did do that. And then when I kind of got to the point and realizing, oh, I shouldn't even be trying to do that. Why am I doing it? Let's just let it out and be free. And it's just so much better of an experience. If you're unfamiliar with what it can feel like, go to a men's support group. I've gone to several, and they are amazing. You will feel like a new human being after your first one. Share just how you're feeling in an extremely safe space. Whew, I'll never forget the first time that I went to one. It was just like I just let kind of everything out that I was feeling, and just a bunch of guys there that were just all just there for me, and not trying to give me advice, but just being there and being present and listening to me. That's all I needed, and that was such a good relief, and helped me through a really dark time, because that was the first time I went, was when my mother-in-law passed away. I went to a men's support group and was able to let that out, and that's what really allowed me to be able to take hold and move forward and not necessarily stop being in this dark place, but kind of start to see the light and be able to continue with my life.
Mm-hmm. In my experience, if I'm not letting myself feel something and then something changes, I'm with a person who makes me realize, okay, it's all right if I'm angry about this. It's all right if I'm sad about this. Then immediately I feel better. Like that release of pressure. It's like working for NAMI, and I don't have to hide it, my mental health condition. I don't have to act like I'm always happy or always have it together. Immediately my mental health is better because that pressure is off.
Yeah, you have to sit with it and process it. Don't ignore it. That's the worst. That's the worst thing you can do.
Right. So if I wanted to tell my brother what to Google, or are there certain men support groups that are more helpful than others? What should he Google?
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's been a minute since I went to my last support group. Oh
We
man,
can
I
come
wish I
back
could
to
think
it.
of it. Yeah, well, if it pops in my head, I'll let you know.
All right. So to be continued on that question. Well, you've kind of covered self-care. Do you want to add anything about what your self-care routine looks like today?
I mean, I pretty much went through my whole self-care routine. I would just emphasize that try out new things. About a few months ago is when I first ever started journaling. which I know that seems like a pretty basic one that you hear about all the time, but I just never did it. And I didn't even really use any prompts or anything. I just get my phone out and I'll just write in it. I'll just write in it what I'm thinking, just get my thoughts out there. And I always like to think like, okay, how am I feeling right now? I'll just start to write it out. And that was really helpful for me because I started doing that when I was having like a lot of just like anxious thoughts that I could not seem to get past, that just kept cycling every single day. And I couldn't figure out, okay, how do I keep living my life without this just being constantly in my head? It was kind of a new thing for me. And that's when I started journaling. I was okay, I'm just gonna start trying this. So I just started writing everything that I was feeling and everything that was making me feel anxious, what was going on. And it's similar to speaking to someone, opening up to someone or talking to a therapist, being able to write it out onto paper. It has a similar impact, and that's what it did for me. And the fact that I'm able to do that anytime I want, or every morning was huge for me. So I would say, as far as self-care goes, make sure you try and do different things. Don't get stuck in your ways, because you might be missing out on something that's like a huge game changer for you.
Right, right. I like that approach of just, pulling in new tools, realizing it's time to change it up because we're fluid. That I think there's an African expression that you never see the same river 2 days in a row, or that, you're always looking at a new river because it's flowing and there are different things going on in that river. I think it's the same with the human spirit. We're always changing and evolving. So maybe today what I need is just to sit quiet or take a nap, and maybe tomorrow journaling, and it can always be different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a question in the Q&A that I want to get to. Usually we wait until after the video of the week, but this is really speaking to me. I am 28 and struggle with social anxiety. I try to go to social events, but avoid them out of fear. What would you say is the first step to break out of that fear?
Sure. So, well, as you probably heard me in the beginning, if you were here and listening, but I talk a lot about kind of exposing yourself to situations that make you feel anxious in really small ways. I'm talking it makes you feel anxious in a really small amount, so not doing something gigantic. So that's really helpful. I think before that, though, what I always do and what I still continue to practice is practice self-love. A big thing for me, and a big way on how I practice it, and there's lots of different ways to do so, but is using self-affirmations. I do that stuff in the mirror pretty frequently, maybe not every day. There was a point where I did do it every single day, but start understanding what these thoughts are that in your head. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not like everybody else. I can't talk to people. I can't make friends. And start reframing those thoughts and start using them as self-affirmations in the mirror. That was a game changer for me. I think that made my process of exposing myself to these situations that made me feel anxious, because obviously these weren't situations I wanted to put myself in, but I wanted to expose myself. But to be able to like reframe those thoughts I was having, then I was able to go in there with a little bit more ease. Not to say it was easy by any means, still difficult to do, but that definitely made it a lot easier to do and go out there. And like I said, just really small things. I mean, so the first ever uncomfortable challenges, I like to call them, that I ever did was in college. And my thing was to just raise my hand one time in every single class. I knew this made me anxious, but this wasn't so overwhelming that, I wouldn't be able to take it on. I can raise my hand one time. It'll be uncomfortable, but I can do it. And so I started doing that over and over and over again. And about a month in, I realized, I can do this without, almost feeling any anxiety. Because you start to train your brain to realize, oh, I don't need anxiety in this moment, because, anxiety is just here to keep you safe, keep you protected. And a lot of times anxiety comes up when, we're already safe and we're already protected. It's perceiving danger that's not really there. I'm not in any danger by raising my hand, but I'm having all these thoughts of what if somebody thinks I, say something stupid or I get the answer wrong. And so I had to kind of retrain my mind to be like, hey, I can do this. I can raise my hand, even if I get the answer wrong, doesn't matter. Effort over results. And I always make sure I, reward my efforts, and I don't care about the results because I'm not going to be able to answer every question correctly, but I can at least get the effort of just getting my hand up there. And as long as I put up the effort and I go do what I sign off to do, cool for me. I'm going to go reward myself. And I'm just going to keep doing that consistently, just doing little baby steps. You're not going to make a giant leap, and nor should you, but just do in small little steps. And over time, you will start to notice a difference. You will start to see the ease and anxiety start to reduce a little bit.
Yeah. And it's so interesting the way the brain works for those of us who have anxiety. Our nervous system and our brain is responding a certain way to the situation. For example, raising your hand in a class, that the nervous system and the brain are saying, oh my gosh, I'm at risk, that it's, like a caveman seeing a saber-toothed tiger or a dinosaur. I need to run, I need to fight, I need to do something. And for some reason, our brains are firing in that direction, but there's no saber-toothed tiger right now. And so I like your description of that you can sort of train your brain to recognize, all right, this is actually not so dangerous. And you just help yourself get used to it. And one thing I really enjoyed, I was in a Columbus support group for a number of years that I facilitated, and the people became friends in the group, and they would make plans like, okay, we're going to go to the grocery store together on Saturday because that's sort of intimidating. And so we'll go together. I remember an occasion where I wanted to go to a French speaking group. I try to speak French occasionally, and I was nervous about it. That same feeling like, oh, I'm not going to look good here. And a friend just went with me. He didn't speak French, but he just sat at a nearby table and was there for support.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so if there's anyone that you trust, or you might be surprised at how people would like to help you, but they don't know what to do. But if you can just find a friend or a partner in approaching some of those intimidating situations, that could be a solution, or a stepping stone towards a solution. All right. So what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? It's an interesting question. I guess I wouldn't say I've always been, but when I got out of high school and I started in the college and I started to get into this mental health space, I kind of started to change my mindset along a lot of things. I started getting really into, personal development, which kind of led into mental health and whatnot. And just kind of developed a really like kind of optimistic mindset. Not like a toxic positivity type of thing, but just I'm pretty optimistic about things, even though we're in a mental health stigma, and the suicide rates are really bad, especially among teens, and have been over the past 10 years, to be honest. I'm optimistic that we're on the right path. I think we're starting to get the right things going finally. So I'm hopeful of that, and I'm glad to be a part of that mission, taking the step forward, and pushing people to start making the right moves, getting schools to put resources and the information and knowledge. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm not answering it very well, but I mean, I try to stay hopeful just about everything, because what's the alternate option to just kind of live in despair and think that nothing's going to go right? And if I am thinking that, then that will happen. But if I keep my hope alive and what I'm doing, what I'm trying to achieve, and what I hope to see the world be one day, then that's the only way that it will get there. It definitely won't get there if I'm thinking on the opposite direction. So I guess that's what keeps my hope alive.
Yeah, I really like that answer. Your hope is based on your own experience, that you've seen changes and you felt changes based on some hard work and some research and effort.
Yeah.
And there's change in the world around us. And I agree with that. I grew up in a very stoic Irish Catholic American family, and it just wasn't, we didn't talk about emotions. We just
Yeah.
didn't, that wasn't our style. You wanted to be strong, silent type. Um, and realizing that I could find in places like NAMI and peer centers and meeting people like you, this language of recovery and hope, it makes a profound difference. So I feel hopeful when I focus on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to wrap up the interview portion of the show. Thanks everyone for being here with us tonight. And thanks, of course, to Kyle. I want to give a big shout out to our volunteer behind the scene. It's our last night with Caitlin Rita, our App State intern, MSW student. She's done a wonderful job with us. Thank you, Caitlin, for being here and for all that you've done. All right, we've got a video of the week, and this has to do with the upcoming NAMI walk. We've got a walk coming up. The North Carolina version is coming up in Perimeter Park, Morrisville on Saturday, May 20th. And I'm very excited. So we've got a fun video clip from our national team to support our walk. I do hope to see all of you there Saturday, May 20th, Perimeter Park in Morrisville. Let's have a look at this.
First,
we need to be able to stand up and say, it's okay to have a mental health condition. It's okay to be able to reach out and ask for help.
NAMI Walks is the best. It's a celebration of all of our members, all of their friends and coworkers and relatives, all of the places of worship. We get together and we march together and we clap and we bang drums and we say, hey, mental health challenges are pretty normal. We can live in recovery, and NAMI's there to support you.
Hello! We out here praying for NAMI, y'all. We're going this way. Money is raised, awareness is raised, so people don't have to feel like they're in sinking sand. But you can get the help, not be ashamed, and live a free life.
All right. Just wanted to give you a little snippet. It's a 6-minute video, so if you want to check that out, it's on YouTube. And let us know if you have questions for Kyle. We're very excited to hear from you. And I'll be checking Facebook for the questions as well. Please fill out, I'll make a quick announcement while we wait for your questions to come in. Please check out the survey that will magically appear when you leave our Zoom show. It helps us improve over time to know what you liked and what you'd like to see improved on the show. It helps us show our funders the value of what we do and that we're evaluating ourselves and trying to improve. So fill out that survey for us. We appreciate it so much. And join us next week. We've got Linda Lee. She's talking about Asian American and Pacific Islander mental health. She lost a best friend to suicide, and ever since then, she's been trying to improve conversations and knowledge around mental health in her community. All right. So, questions. What's a perfect day for you like, Kyle?
A perfect day for me. I guess a perfect day is just me getting up, doing my morning routine, exercising, and just going through my work day. I enjoy doing what I do, whether it's speaking or creating content. I always find that to be fun. I just enjoy it. And then really just to end the day, just hanging out with my family. I have 3 kids and a wife, and they're all under the age of 10. So I'm never bored. I haven't been bored in almost 10 years. So it's always fun. Yeah, that's my perfect day.
All right, you've got a house full. That does sound fun. All right. Yeah, so when you meet someone who's young and struggling, maybe they're at the very start of their mental health journey, what do you say to encourage them?
What you're feeling is only temporary. it's not a permanent feeling. And honestly, neither is happiness. And I think that's a challenging thing when I first started getting into this space of like, at first it was like, my goal was to always be happy. I have to get to where I'm like always feeling good, always feeling happy. And because I had that goal, I would hardly ever felt happy or good because I had this, perfectionism goal, which was not achievable. And so just realizing that any feeling that you feel is temporary. So even if it's a bad feeling, it's temporary, it will go away. It will, you will persevere. If you're happy, know that it's temporary. Be very grateful for this moment that you're feeling really good, you're feeling happy. But yeah, everything is temporary and there's nothing that you can't persevere through. And if you are going through something tough, going through a struggle, that this will make you stronger. If you could find a way to persevere, you can find a way to get through this. Oh, it's going to make you stronger. It's just going to be another really cool chapter in your book of life.
So speaking of books, what was the process of writing a book like?
Well, it was during the pandemic, so I had quite a bit of extra free time. So I knew I wanted to write it on doing morning routines because that was something that just like I got really obsessed with when I got into the mental health space. And it had a huge impact on me. So I knew I wanted to write something on that. And it was really just about organizing all my ideas and everything that I thought was a mistake or could have been done better, or a misconception that I believed for a long time and I found out to not be true, and organizing all that stuff out so I could lay it all out for anybody who read the book so they could kind of have a shortcut, so to speak, of finding a routine that works really well with them without kind of having to go through some of the stuff that I went through, so they could, just cut straight to the chase, basically.
Mm-hmm. And what's the title of your book?
10 minutes to feel less anxious, how to be proactive with your mental health and anxiety.
So all about that morning routine. What's the 10-minute reference?
It's basically in reference to that you can spend as little as 10 minutes being proactive with having a morning routine that's even only 10 minutes. It can help you feel less anxious throughout the day. It doesn't have to be like a 2-3 hour long routine. It can be something really short, really small, as long as you take some time to yourself. That's really all that matters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said a lot of interesting things as you were describing your book, and about adjusting your thought process and realizing where your mistakes were. And I think one thing you said that's really powerful is having that goal of happiness, we're setting ourselves up to fail if our goal is to have that static happy state. That's just not the human condition. Even if you have a happy life, it's just not how it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So aside from your book, is there a book or a philosophy that you would recommend that people might find helpful?
Can't think of a book off the top of my head, but a philosophy rather. If maybe you've heard of it, internal family system. Some people call it parts work. But I think that has been really helpful to me, viewing my emotions like that. So if you're listening and not familiar with what that is, it's basically viewing all your different emotions as like separate parts inside your body. So like, I have an angry part, I have a happy part, I have a socially anxious part, a joyful part, sad part, whatever it may be. And some of us have more active parts than others. So like my socially anxious part was like really active when I was younger. But it's all about, understanding that, they kind of like take turns in a sense. I almost kind of like visualize them on a bus. Like I got all my parts in the bus and like, I want present conscious Kyle to be driving the bus. But sometimes I'll have, anxiety driving it. And so I have to, find a way to gently get anxiety moved towards the back and, get me back into the driver's seat. So I think that's been really helpful for me, just kind of like viewing everything as like little parts, your emotions. Yeah.
I love that metaphor and that visual. We have a question from Evelyn on Facebook. What do you think has been the most significant thing that helped you in your journey?
The most significant thing. So I'll be more specific. I would say morning routines, but I'll be a little bit more specific. I'll say meditation. Doing that was a huge impact on my mental health. Not at first. At first, when I tried meditation, my brother told me to try it, and I didn't do any research on it. I just grabbed my phone, set a timer, went in my bedroom in the dark, and set it for like 5 minutes, and just sat there with my eyes closed. And the whole time, I'm just thinking, it's probably been 1 minute. It's probably 30 seconds left. It was not meditation. I didn't know what I was doing. But it was really helpful when I started using apps like Headspace or Insight Timer to give me some like good guided meditations, so somebody could tell me kind of what to do in a sense. If I'm going through breathing, or if I'm supposed to be feeling different parts of my body, doing different body scans. That was a huge impact for me. It had like a kind of a weird impact on just kind of how I saw life in general. And I say kind of weird because like one thing in particular for me was when I was like driving, I used to get like really upset if like someone cut me off, or I'm trying to weave around. I'm really aware of what everyone's doing, and I might let my anger get out onto me. When I started meditating for a while, that stopped happening. I just had like this present sense of mind where it's just like it's not worth it. It just kind of let it go. It's kind of like meditation. It's talk a lot of, when you have a thought, it's not about trying to get it to go away. It's about just kind of like watching it like a cloud in the sky, like, oh, there it goes. And so like in a way, like that's how like traffic was for me. And it was kind of like a weird way to see it. And I was like, oh, and I noticed other parts of my life where it impacted as well. But definitely meditation.
Mm, that's a great answer. And I love your sort of what your thought process was the very first time you tried it, because it doesn't necessarily come easily. I use the Calm app, which is also very nice. And it can, sometimes you have a meditation that feels very peaceful, but sometimes it's more frustrating. But you are either way sort of training your mind and letting your nervous system really calm down and rest. And it's very healthful.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good way to see your thoughts too. A lot of times you'll have like cycling thoughts running through your head that are kind of like an autopilot. You don't even realize it. You start meditating and you start to see like, oh, yeah, it's the same one I saw yesterday, the day before.
Right. I recently had this insight that early in the day I wake up and I wake up with my inner critic being loud. And I do try to follow a morning routine that helps me reorient. But I realized at one point that like I was almost looking for the moment or the decision or the bad thing that would ruin the day. And I don't know when I got in that habit, but wow, it's pretty powerful to realize that and say, okay, I can have a different response to that bad thing. I don't have to feel like the day is ruined. But you have to be aware of those thoughts. They lie below the surface, way down in the soot of the river. So yeah, meditation can help bring those up. All right. So do you have anything else that you'd like to share? It feels like we're kind of winding up. We've got a lot of questions answered, and I have heard some wonderful insights. I appreciate your time tonight.
Sure. I don't have a whole lot else to share. I always like to kind of end on just a quick sentence of make your mental health as high as a priority as your physical health. I think if we can do that, we'll see a big difference in the country, the world. if we can make that more of a normal thing for mental health, just be as normal as physical health, I can only imagine what that would do. That would be tremendous impacts.
It would indeed. And if you're out there feeling like your mental health is a struggle, you don't know who to talk to, who might be able to direct you, people don't speak your language, please give us a call at NAMI. We have a helpline open 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we would love to chat with you about what you're going through and help you get you pointed in the right direction. We understand. Thank you so much, Kyle. It's been wonderful to listen and get to know you a little bit. I wish you the very best of luck in your 1,000,000-person goal. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Peg. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
All right. Have a great night. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.